The Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast is here. There's no Alan Seslowski. There's no Nate Liss. I just quote tweeted him. He was right again, except all those times he came on this show and was wrong. Today we're joined by one Jax Falcone in the Alan Seslowski seat. Happy to have him from the Undroppables. We have Theo here with me wearing an Undroppables hat. It's great gear. Jax, how do you feel? First time on the Sonic Truth Dynasty podcast.
The Sonic Truth Dynasty focused fantasy podcast or some nonsense. Am I right?
Well, that is what Alan does, and that's his style, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to put it on you at the last minute to say, hey, you got to bring us in. That's rude. You know, we're going to hopefully have you back on another show, and another show, and another show. It would be great. And then maybe you could have your own sort of tagline for the show.
I'll give it a shot. I tell you what, I just miss Nate Liss whenever I hear, Alan say the Dynasty focused fantasy podcast. It just sounds bad. You gotta cut that out. You gotta edit it out.
Everybody hates it, and that's why he does it.
Right.
It's for the bit. And Alan is the key for that. Like Alan will hold a bit longer than Matt holds a bit really a long time, but Alan will equally hold a bit if it's adding entertainment value. So yeah, shout out to Alan.
I'll hold a bit, I'll hold a grudge. So
you're already fired up about the pre-show chat. You're fired up, Matt. You're fired up.
I have a grudge right now, an active grudge against Theo Gremminger. I absolutely do, because I go on all these shows and I just preach against reactionary fantasy analysis, right? And all you need to do is know how reactionary the public is, your league mates are, even analysts that you're reading and listening to, and stay the course. That's what we talked about. Starter Stream Show was one of the great starter stream shows, 8 a.m. Sunday mornings I've ever had, just by staying the course and not getting too far out over those skis. That's all it is. It's old school fantasy football. That's what we do here. That's what I do here now. I used to be a young pup. I used to be an up-and-comer. Had all these new fancy metrics, right? Yeah, all these toys. It was fun and games. We were Brashad Perriman to the moon. I remember. Oh, yeah. And then a funny thing happened on the way to the moon. A lot of those fantasy teams, especially in Dynasty, crashed. They crashed back into the Earth's atmosphere. And now all those lessons learned have brought me to a place where I'm not fucking falling for the banana in the tailpipe scat back who is rumored to take over at some point, and it never fucking happens.
I mean, it happens more often than not these days, doesn't it? We're going to talk about Bucky Irving and Rashad
We're talking
White
about him
here.
right now.
We're talking about it right now. Okay, so let's have this conversation. So Matt Kelly, who has Bucky Irving on his Kings Classic roster, and he's going to be enjoying him in the starting lineup this weekend. Matt, so you're going to have to watch Bucky Irving earn points for you when you're disparaging him as some like tiny little scatback. Let's talk about this for a little bit.
Well,
can I guess who the co-manager is there?
On that team, we also somehow bid up Jahmyr Gibbs, or is this a different team?
We're not crying a river over bidding up Jahmyr Gibbs.
No, but this is what happened. I remember in the moment we were bidding up Jahmyr Gibbs, and he ended up closing for more than Saquon Barkley went for. And I had my hands on my face. Right, my face was I was crying. I wanted Barkley. It was the perfect encapsulation of what I hate, which is you go in, you want the guy that is everything, the guy that's 225 pounds, the guy that's explosive. He wins in all phases, scores touchdowns, catches the ball out of the backfield, has 25 fantasy point per game potential, and then you end up with a satellite back who doesn't even get the touches that matter inside the 5-yard line. This is what happens.
Okay.
That was the perfect encapsulation. Us ending up, me and you, getting Gibbs over Saquon, play that out over and over again in different iterations throughout the season. And my only hope is that people can learn from us and not fall into that trap, not end up with Bucky Irving instead of Roschon Johnson on their roster.
Okay, all right, wait, hold on a second. We're talking about Bucky Irving versus Rachaad White right now. Yeah. And Rachaad White is not Saquon Barkley. He's not in the style of Saquon Barkley.
No.
And we're talking about, Matt, okay, let's do a little bit
He's not in the cost.
And he's not in the cost. I got to pass the mic to Jax here, but I'm gonna first start out and then I'm gonna tag over. Like we're a tag team. It's like a 2-for-1 versus the Podfather right here. It's like a
the people's elbow is waiting.
Yeah, people's elbow is waiting. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about it. Let's talk about, we don't have to go like crazy history. Let's go 2023. 2023, we see 4 running backs sub 200 pounds finish as RB1s in points per game. You had Kyron Williams, you had Jahmyr Gibbs, who you're disparaging right now, who had a fantastic rookie season, and you had James Cook, who finished as an RB1. You had Devon Achane, who gave you an RB1 in points per game, and anybody who had Devon Achane, it was like found money because the cost did not equal the points you got. It was an incredible find for you. Now let's talk about today. Rachaad White was everything we wanted him to be when we told you to draft him 2 years ago at Player Profiler. We won on this one, Matt. We won on this one. Rachaad White gave us a top 5 season last year. He had incredible volume, top 3 volume among all running backs last year under Dave Canales. Was an inefficient runner, but yards per carry don't necessarily translate year after year. We can agree on all that, right? Rachaad White was awesome last year for the money you had to spend on him or the draft capital in Dynasty. But now there's a more efficient and more talented runner who the only knock on is he weighs 8 pounds below 200 pounds. Let's talk about the efficiency right now. Rachaad White, through 3 games, has 66 yards on the ground on 31 carries. Bucky Irving, in the same offense, has 154 yards rushing on 25 carries. Rachaad White, Jax, and Matt had a 15-yard carry at one point in week 1 against Washington. If you remove that carry, he's averaging 1.7 yards per carry. So he's a 1.7 yard per carry guy who had a 15-yard run. Bucky Irving, if you remove both 30-yard runs he's given you, is averaging over 4 yards per carry. Now you're going to talk about the receiving work. Rachaad White.
Well, no, let's also remove the carries where he went to the right, and let's also remove the carries where a defender blitzed, and let's also remove the carries where one of the linemen tripped.
So keep your 15-yard carry in there, and I'll keep both my 30-yard carries in there. Then we talk about Bucky Irving. Let's talk about the Bucs offense. The Bucs offense in week 1 scores 37 points. They beat the hell out of Washington. Great win. Back-to-back weeks, 20 points and 7 points. The more efficient running back is going to see more carries this week. And when we talk about receiving work, that's the thing that's keeping Rachaad White propped up. Is he a much better receiver than Bucky Irving right now? I'm not so sure about that. I think if Bucky Irving had the same opportunities, the receiving production would be right there. Same conference in college, Matt, and Bucky Irving was more efficient in the same conference as Rachaad White. One was a 3rd-round pick, one was a 4th-round pick. Bucky Irving, the writing is on the wall, and this is like, I got to hand it over to Jax. Jax, do you disagree with anything I said, and would you like to add to any of this arguments?
So the thing that I think Matt gets himself caught on is that he's mistaking Rachaad White for an elite prospect, which he never was. He was always a high value guy who could be David Johnson if everything lined up. But he's been an inefficient runner. That was the criticism of him coming out of college as well, was that he was inefficient. I was a huge Rachaad White fan. I've profited on Rachaad White. But at the end of the day, don't get confused. And in today's NFL, really, you look at these running backs, and it's really just targets and opportunity. Weighted opportunity is all you're looking for. Right now, Bucky Irving is probably going to wrestle away the 1A role away from Rachaad White. Rachaad White hasn't been efficient so far this year. Bucky Irving, 48% success rate. 35% for Rachaad White. So he's just been a more efficient runner on a down-to-down basis. Did I see this coming? No. Do I think that Bucky Irving is a what Matt's talking about, this sort of lead back in the mold of Saquon Barkley? Of course not. And we shouldn't expect that but we can reap value from Bucky Irving. And if you had drafted Bucky Irving in the 4th round and now you're selling him for a 2nd round pick or whatever, using him in a package to move up to a real running back,
yes,
then you've already won.
Yes.
But the point of the matter is if you play 0 running back, which I do a lot in dynasty startups, Bucky Irving's perfect because he's found money. He cost me 0. He's in my starting lineup this coming week, and he's going to get me 10 points. So yeah,
he's going to get you 10 points in the starting lineup.
What's Rashad going to get?
He might very well. He might very well get you 10 fantasy points. That's exactly right. What's happening with Rashad White is not easy to explain. Why he hasn't been as efficient, let's say, as Bucky Irving. It's not like Bucky Irving is this low to the ground, tackle breaker, super elusive guy. He is. He's shifty, right? But he's 5'10". He's lanky. He actually is like a much smaller version of Rashad White. And in the long run, in a larger sample in the NFL, those types of players are going to give you some big, explosive long runs because, especially a guy like Rashad White has like an 80+% percentile burst score.
Yet he only averages 3.5 yards a carry for his career. 2 yards per carry this year, has never averaged over 3.7 yards per carry.
Exactly.
And in those ways, you have to look at his skill set. And success rate does sort of lend a skill set. And I just don't think he's a very instinctive runner. I'm no scout. It's not like I'm sitting here. But by the numbers, and you do hear a lot of film guys will say, he doesn't do this and that. The numbers bear that out, right? It's one thing if we're going to see him ripping 6 yards a carry, you're like, I don't really give a shit. But when we see him, not being productive, here's the other thing. What we think almost doesn't matter. It's what the coaches think. And they are sort of leaning closer and closer to putting Bucky Irving ahead of Rashad White. Certainly a 50-50 is what we're seeing right now, and the better 50 going to Bucky Irving. It's scary, man. If you hold Rashad White, now's not the time to sell. You're just hoping Bucky Irving falls in a manhole.
You're
falls in a manhole.
Hold Rashad White, maybe even acquire him. I'm actively acquiring Rashad White, by the way.
Sure.
Rashad White is a screaming buy right now. He had his worst game as a pro in a game where he was playing through a strained groin. He probably should have just sat the game out, right? So if he is out instead of playing, he's a warrior, right? We know that he's incredibly dedicated to his strength and conditioning and is super dedicated to the sport. The guy, he did everything that you could ever want to, rise up from community college to Arizona State to the NFL in the 3rd round. The guy's wired the right way, very opposite of DeAndre Swift in that way, right? These are polar opposite type players, and yet in Dynasty, they're both seemingly headed in the same direction. They're both seemingly headed out of the league, about to be usurped by Roschon Johnson and Bucky Irving, and their time has come and gone. And the big question in Dynasty is, with DeAndre Swift and Rashad White, is now the time to sell low and just get what you can for them because they're going straight to 0, except that's not the path for Rashad White. Rashad White's only 25 years old. He was also an RB1 last year, in addition to some lighter backs that were also RB1s. Technically, I guess James Cook was an RB1. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch there.
He was an RB1. He was RB12.
I know. It's like it's a technicality. Congratulations. In other league sizes, he's not an RB1. Whatever. Okay? Rashad White is on a completely different career path.
Other league sizes. What a technicality throws out there.
It's true, though.
Yeah, in
18
he was exactly RB12.
Right.
Okay,
No,
okay.
totally.
So
point.
If you don't have Rashad White already, now's a great time to go get him after his worst game where he played through a groin injury where many other running backs would have just sat out the game altogether. And now, because he did play through it and he was inefficient in that game and they did lose in an embarrassing fashion, now he gets besmirched with that reputation that, this is who he is. It's not, this was him playing through an injury and happened to have a bad game. No. This is what we've always seen. This is confirming what the trend in the statistics. It's not a sample size problem anymore. This guy's now has like 400 plus carries. It's over. He can't run efficiently. He has bad instincts, bad vision.
You're talking about Rashad White?
He's not a quality NFL running back. That is the narrative.
No, well
that is absolutely the narrative, and that's I'm saying that is a narrative that you can capitalize on and buy Rashad White in Dynasty right now. But that's not my point. That's not my grudge and my objection to Theo's general approach. It's all of these guys. It's more the buying of Bucky Irving, the hyping of Bucky Irving, because Jax is absolutely right. Now is the time to hold Rashad White and sell Bucky Irving. Congratulations, it's found money. You got a 4th rounder who's now worth a 2nd rounder, and Theo's telling me in the chat, "Oh, I can't even get him for a 2nd rounder." And then I'm like, "Well, what does that mean? 1st rounder? You better cash him in now." All these guys, Jaleel McLaughlin, Chase Brown, it's one after another, after another, after another of these fringe satellite backs that are day 3 picks that aren't particularly athletic, and sometimes they luck box their way into 17,000 goal line carries like Kyron Williams. But I will always and forever trade those players when I happen to have them, because I just be drafting a lot of running backs in rookie drafts, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round, running back. You're going to end up with a Kyron, even if you don't love him, because you're just drafting so many running backs and so many of these rookie drafts. You're going to end up with a lot of Bucky Irving. And then the question is, when do you sell? That's the question.
Well, here's
hey,
so
one
Rashad
quick
White,
note, Theo.
Go ahead.
James Cook, running back, won in 6 team leagues in 2024. Just wanted to put that out there.
I love it. Let's talk a little bit about Rashad White. So Rashad White, I see people in the chat making the Najee Harris, Jalen Warren argument for the Rashad White, Bucky Irving, and that sort of kind of proves my point here. I think that the lesson learned here is Rashad White was a player that people should have been selling last offseason. Rashad White has a skill set that's going to translate to multiple. So him and Harris are kind of opposite. Harris and him are both backs with size, and there's always going to be coaches that like those guys. And if you land like a David Montgomery, you will regain some dynasty value. If you land in a perfect spot like David Montgomery did in Detroit. But when it comes to Rashad White,
no, those guys often will find themselves in fantasy point scoring situations. That is the point. That's why you go and you acquire a David Montgomery when he's at his low point in his original team.
That's fair, but I'll say that the static talent that translates with Rashad White that'll carry with him team to team is not the running. It's the fact that he's a big back that can catch the ball. Him and Najee Harris are completely different. Najee Harris is a guy who plays hurt, and Najee Harris is a guy who can handle volume. Najee Harris, when a pass-catching back entered the equation, Najee Harris conceded his receiving work to Jalen Warren right away. And that was after an RB1 year. So Najee Harris's rookie year was similar to Rashad White's year 2. And they were similar in scoring, and they were similar in dynasty value. The lesson learned for me, Matt, is when we get a back that's not a Jonathan Taylor, not a Breece Hall, not a Ken Walker, not a true elite athlete, a true elite bell cow profile running back, the lesson is you should sell at the peak, because your opportunity to sell Rashad White for a 1st round pick, that door closed. I could have done that last summer, and there were people doing that. They were flat out taking a whatever they could get 1st round pick in a single QB league, and you could have flipped Rashad White into Brian Thomas. You could have flipped Rashad White into Ladd McConkey. Whoa. You could have flipped Rashad White into several of these wide receivers, where right now you couldn't make a Brian Thomas or Rashad White.
I did not know. Maybe this is my ignorance. I had no idea Rashad White had much value in Dynasty. We've always been way out ahead on Rashad White. In what world were people paying 1st round picks for Rashad White? That was a thing that happened?
Single QB last summer, that was a thing that was popular in leagues like FFPCs. You were seeing like 111s, 112s.
Okay, the 112. Okay, we got the RB12 and James Cook. We got the 112 1st round pick, Rashad White. Rashad White wasn't this big land grab player, right? No one was out here running out to get Rashad White at any point, right? And you didn't feel like you had this windfall profit from Rachaad White because most people looked around in their fantasy league, and I'm aware of. Again, I could be ignorant. I'm admitting I'm not in every league, and I don't have ears and eyes, across every fantasy format. But last time I checked, there wasn't a big sell window that opened up for Rachaad White in Dynasty. I don't remember this. Now, I think this is a little bit of revisionist history. They're like, oh, you should have got out. You could have got that 112, and that 112 could have been Keon Coleman. Oh, you fucked up. Not really, dude. Not really. At no point has Rachaad White ever been super highly regarded by the Dynasty community. That's never happened, which is why I've never had an opportunity to sell him or recommend selling him in any Dynasty format at all.
So this spring on Keep Trade Cut, he peaked at RB13. So I think that's a pretty high value. And he kind of stayed that way. He was right in that RB14, RB15 range until the season started. And now he's like the RB26. So yeah, his value cratered. If you were to look at, Bucky Irving, his value is obviously, skyrocketed, mainly because he's been able to force himself onto the field. I would argue that when you look at guys like David Montgomery and who's the other one that you mentioned? Oh, Najee Harris. These are like the complete opposite of Rachaad White. They can't even be similar because especially David Montgomery is like the standard trusted back in the NFL. Like coaches across the league would be like, I'd take David Montgomery on my team. Rachaad White is not that player. He's fragile for those reasons because you have to understand what coaches prioritize. They prioritize the ability to convert. Success rate is kind of a proxy to what coaches want because it's like they get the job done. A 2-yard must-have, they get 3. Rashaad's going to get 1 in those moments and then break off 10 extra yards on a run that, Najee can't. But that's not as highly valued in real football, where it is valued pretty strongly for us, because I don't really care if he gets 1 or 2 yards when he needs 1 or 2. I care that he gets 10 more on the big runs because I score fantasy points. So there is a little bit of a disconnect in that regard. And I don't think that Rachaad White, is beloved across all coaching circles in the NFL. And for that reason, he becomes a little bit of a fragile running back asset.
So now we're getting in the heads of all the coaches around the league, and we think that they don't like Rachaad White, and that's the reason to sell in Dynasty. You just described a running back that has the virtues that we all want, which is commanding targets out of the backfield. And then last year, what did he do? He was capitalizing in the green zone, right? The trusted running back to score touchdowns when they were close to the goal line, and the trusted running back to dump off passes to when the quarterback is under pressure, under duress. He was the running back that the coaches could trust. And one of the reasons why he was so productive last year, he was so productive because he was top 5 in the league in carries. And this year, he's averaging more targets per game in 2024 than he did in 2023. And that's the thing that all of these PPR connoisseurs always claim that that's what they care about, except with Rachaad White. Then it doesn't count. Then it's
that's not
his
true.
running inefficiency is just so overwhelming. It's too much.
This is DeAndre Swift 2.0 in some ways.
Won't bear it. The coaches
there you go.
Can't stand
you
it.
nailed it. You nailed it.
Yeah, no. See, because there's 2 factors that come into play. One is target earning, by the way. That's a huge, huge factor in who you want to target as a running back because, let's face it, none of us were too excited about Zamir White because even if he got everything he could handle, it was probably going to be 15 to 20 carries and very few targets, not as valuable. So, with Rachaad White, yes, his target earning ability makes him an elite upside play, but his ability to convert the simple things makes him a fragile player because here's the thing. In the running back position, the coach has to put you in and call your name. Otherwise, you don't get that opportunity. As a wide receiver, target earning is more heavily weighted as a more important metric because you're likely on the field. There's 3 of you. So generally speaking, even a a wide receiver that is a little less trusted by the coaches or whatever is going to be on the field because he's earning targets. So it's a little bit different. But in a running back position, you have to be on the field. Last year, they didn't have a better option in Tampa Bay. I mean, literally, the corpse of Leonard Fournette was gone. And so now you look at Bucky Irving, who, by your account, my account, isn't that great a prospect. I would agree with you, Matt, but he's still eating into his lunch a little bit, and that's got to be scary. If it's not, you're dynastying wrong.
There you go. And I think the way that you treat Rachaad White is a guy, if you want to get out of him, you're sending him in 2-for-1 trade offers. Matt.
Well, can you have a take? We're not here to enable people to trade Rachaad White.
I think you can go both ways here.
The advice needs to be on this program: do not trade Rachaad White, and do not just let him go in some 2-for-1 deal where he's just a throw-in. Absolutely not.
I didn't say a throw-in, but I do think, like everything you said about him, he's the kind of player that I'd love to tear up from. And if it's part of a 2-for-1, this is the kind of player you want to tear up
You're
from.
wish casting again. You're making up stuff. You're making up demand for Rachaad White that doesn't exist across Dynasty in the last year. And you're making up this ability to level up from Rachaad White because nobody wants him. The only people that want him are in this audience. And they already have him. So there's no market. We admit it. We have to live through this with some players. You have to live through it. The people that had David Montgomery, and they lived through the chilling effect that happened where the market went cold for him. They couldn't get out of him even if they wanted to, so they just held on, and now they're very happy. It's a better comp. David Montgomery to Rachaad White is a better comp than Najee Harris. Najee Harris is the opposite player to Rachaad White, as we've talked about. He is not a target earner like Rachaad White at all. But the reason I love you guys bringing up Najee Harris is that it's in perfect contrast to the Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren was the guy the Dynasty Leaguers wanted. He was the undrafted guy. He was the guy that was better in the passing game. He was the guy that we could imagine that eventually he would seize the job from that dusty old Najee Harris, who's no longer an efficient runner, maybe never was. We can't wait to get our hands on Jaylen Warren and the upside whence he gets the job, because he's destined to get the job. The coaches have said they want to give him more touches. That's what they said all last season. They're looking forward to giving Jaylen Warren more touches because he earned them. And then what happened to him is what always happens to these guys, these Chase Browns and these Jaylen Warrens, and the list extends forever. There are exceptions where a Chris Thompson did have a season. A Theo Riddick will have a season. And he's the reason. These players are the reason why any of us even bother rostering Jaleel McLaughlin. Right? But this is what I heard on a loop. Oh, we got to bump up. We got to juice up Chase Brown. Oh, we got to jump. It's constant. It's this constant stream of satellite backs, of undersized backs that flashed a couple big runs, and it completely tilted their statistics. So they looked super efficient in a small sample. And our job as analysts is to take a step back and say, actually, it's not a good idea to give up, what's the popular first round pick that you love to talk about? The 112. It's really not a good idea to send the 112 for Bucky Irving right now. Please don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Please don't do that.
And
that is your job, Theo. And you're losing people money, and you're killing me. You're making me every time be the bad guy.
Do not do that.
Step in and say, actually, no. No,
I am synonymous with making
fall
people money.
For the Bucky Irving banana in the tailpipe. No matter what Theo is saying, I don't want to have to tell people not to listen to my best analyst. You're putting me in a terrible position.
We want to back things up a little bit. We can put it on constant loop the amount of money I've made people over the years. If we had a Venmo it might have like run out because
I
then
had
you
to
would
tell
have
you to
maxed out.
knock it off with Chase Brown, knock it off with Jalen Warren,
But
knock it
Chase
off
Brown
with
was
Jaleel
never-
McLaughlin. And now I'm on record saying knock it the fuck off with Bucky Irving. These guys are all the same. And
No,
yet
they're
they
not.
had a couple games with a couple
No, they're
big
not.
runs. And the coach
No,
said
they're not.
something nice about them. That's
No,
not enough to go out and
Yeah,
start
this is-
sending
this is-
major capital, significant capital for those players. You will be underwater.
No
So
one,
who would
no
you-
one is advocating.
Matt,
no
who
one
would
is
you- who would you-
advocated trading a first-round pick for Bucky Irving.
No,
One's doing that. No one's doing that. No one's doing that. But
Or even
what
a
you
second
don't want to
rounder.
do is
Even a
even
second,
a second rounder. You don't want a second rounder for Bucky Irving right
That
now?
is a
Why not?
bad idea. He runs a 4.55. He had a maximum of 172 carries at the college level, not
Matt,
not
Matt,
high school, the college level. This
Bucky
is
Irving-
not a player. He's a day 3 pick. This is the opposite type of player that you should be going out and acquiring. If you happen to have him when the trade window opens up, it's a good time to sell before he gets injured, before he fumbles, before one of a number of things that can happen as soon as a player starts commanding any significant touches in the NFL who is unproven and is small and not super explosive. All of the sudden, all of their flaws become exposed when you ratchet the volume up, and coaches will do that. They'll dabble, just like they'll dabble with Jalen Warren. They'll dabble with these players, and then they end up reverting right back to Najee Harris. Except in this case, Rachaad White is a hell of a lot better option than Najee Harris.
Najee Harris was outscored by Jalen Warren last year. The amount that you had to spend on Jalen Warren in dynasty startups versus Najee Harris, the amount you had to spend on Jalen Warren in redraft versus Najee Harris last year. If you took Jalen Warren last year, you won. If you took Najee Harris last year, you lost.
We're
Najee
talking
Harris
about
was
this
outscored.
year. We're talking about
Okay,
this
we're
year.
talking
Of
about this year.
course, if you take a
Bucky
shot
Irving-
on an undrafted running back who's never done anything and he ends up doing something, your job as a dynasty manager is to profit from that and flip him. Flip him. It should be an instinct. And even if 2 weeks go by and he continues to run pure, Bucky Irving continues to run pure, and maybe there's a rumor about a trade that happened where the guy was able to flip him for the 112, and then you're like, oh man, now I've got FOMO. Now I missed out. I should have waited and flipped him a couple weeks later. You don't want to inject that brainworm into our audience. The right move, technically, by the probabilities, the right move is to take a running back with the Bucky Irving profile and start shopping him now.
If you can get a big high offer for, I would argue that if you can get way over market for any running back in Dynasty, it's a trade you should consider. Trading running backs is the way to win in Dynasty, and I do it all the time.
But
at the same
why
time,
do I feel like, explain this to me. Why do I feel like my job as Atlas is to hold up the dynasty rankings on my back and just stop all of this running back hype, all these fringe running backs that continue to get hyped up? Oh, we got to push this guy up. Oh, we got to get this guy higher. And I'm like, if it's a running back, probably not. And then also, if it's an undersized running back, even more unlikely. Is that a good idea? And then if it's an undersized running back who's not particularly athletic, it's a really, really bad idea. So let's just knock it off with the pumping of the running backs, in particular, smaller and slower running backs. Take a step back, zoom out, and focus on what matters, which are wide receivers like Malik Nabers.
That's a nice segue. But I would like to add that Bucky Irving, I have had him high up. After week 1, we had him as the number 2 waiver wire ad on the week on my waiver wire column. And I will continue to tell people to add Bucky Irving when they can add him. And I think, Matt, the one thing that today's NFL, the one thing we're kind of getting away from in today's NFL, there are far less bell cows, and these high value touchbacks who can do things like Bucky Irving are going to provide us utility for our dynasty teams. Does he have 5 years in him where this guy's going to be some like long-term 5-year bell cow and like a Bijan Robinson? Absolutely not. But I think if you find people that are also on the flip side not valuing what they have in Bucky Irving, then this is also an opportunity to buy. So I think you can make an argument that there is plenty of running backs that are both buys and sells at the same time. It's just what the market gives you. So
Correct.
I will continue. We will revisit Bucky Irving versus Rachaad White in a month and then in 2 months, and you'll have plenty of opportunities here. But I think that you make a good point on selling running backs high always, and Jax will tell you the exact same thing. But if you talk about
it's kind of how you look at running backs, whether or not, you know, the whole idea of running backs is, look, if I'm rostering Bucky Irving right now and I'm a competitive team because I've gone 0 running back and he's playing for me, that's great. If I've drafted Bucky Irving and I'm a rebuilding team, I'm looking to flip Bucky Irving immediately. Absolutely. If I can net a second, maybe a second and a third, you know, absolutely. You know, so it's all about how you view the running back position. Never think, oh, this is the next guy, especially as Matt points out, one that doesn't have a bell cow skill set. But as he points out, the greatest skill set in the world is now Malik Nabers. So please be my guest to wax poetic about the absolute stud.
We can't. This is what happens. I tried my best to.
We're there.
I tried my best to pivot,
in a month.
But no,
we've done
but there
45 minutes on Rachaad White.
A full-blown myth. I have to now debunk a full-blown myth that the NFL is moving away from running backs with this profile. That is not true in any way. It's always been true of a handful of coaches on the Shanahan coaching tree. They're the ones that will actually unlock a talent like a Raheem Mostert. They will lean into a 190-pound explosive Devon Achane. Now, Devon Achane's different in that he actually runs like a 4.3, and he's super skilled as a runner. That's not fucking Bucky Irving. Okay, that's a big difference, and I want to be careful to make that leap. I'm not going to say that Christian McCaffrey broke people's brains, because Christian McCaffrey was a well-regarded top 10 pick who was a massive bell cow in a major conference during his time in college. Everybody knew coming into the NFL, Christian McCaffrey was a hyper outlier on day one. So I don't think that affected the success of Christian McCaffrey. It isn't what has driven some of this unfortunate hype around the scat backs that we're seeing. It's more the Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler came out undrafted, small school, 200 pounds, and he was a top 5 running back in fantasy. He also just happened to have one of the great work ethics and an incredible athletic profile coming out as one of the more underrated running backs we've ever seen to come out of college. Just happened to go to Western State and, became an Instagram influencer for how obsessive he was about his strength and conditioning. These are the outliers that have broken the brains of fantasy gamers thinking, oh, well, I must have the next Austin Eckler on my hands. When I go through the league, I'm seeing Ramondre Stevenson's. I'm saying, oh, we have Keaton Mitchell in Baltimore. We hit on a running back. Let's go get Derrick Henry, right? Hey, we tried Chase Brown, but we're actually going to give more carries to Zach Moss. Over and over and over again. 220 pounds, Chuba Hubbard. 220 pounds, Jerome Ford. All these plug-and-play running backs, what do they have in common? They're 200 pounds. Zamir White. All these new minted running backs, even J.K. Dobbins. These teams have small running backs, and they've even tried it, right? Philadelphia tried Kenny Gainwell for a week last year. A week they tried him. And then something happened, missed a pass protection, whatever it is, and then they revert right back. And for that reason, when I'm recommending someone go acquire a running back, he should not be some hype-fueled scat back. That is the last profile you should be shopping for. Instead, you should be shopping for an underrated, completely under-the-radar running back with size and a complete skill set who can be a workhorse for years in the league. That guy looks like
Braylon Allen?
Yes. And
I would trade Roshan Johnson straight up for Bucky Irving immediately if I had him.
That would be
in
a mistake.
In a heartbeat.
That would
I'd
be a
take
mistake.
Bucky Irving.
Okay, so
No,
we're going to check back.
Bucky Irving over Roshan. Easy.
We're going to make that. You don't have to do that. First of all, this is the fallacy. Just so everyone that's thinking about starting a Dynasty podcast, just so everyone that is considering getting into this,
I'm just toying with you at this point.
Roshan get punched in the face from the sideline.
See, that's the thing. I can see the rhetorical tricks coming from a mile away. That's called a rhetorical trick, where they'll take a player who has a fraction of the current Dynasty market value and say, well, I would take player X for player Y. Well, actually, you're forcing me to disagree with that, because in this premise, I can't then do another trade and have access to the market. So would I accept that trade? No. Would I go right back and say, okay, I'll give you Bucky Irving, but you have to give me Roshan Johnson and a draft pick, because I
thought
can
you liked
see
Roshan.
the market value. They're not equivalent players. If you want to say, I would take this guy for this guy straight up, they have to actually come into it with similar lifetime values and similar market sentiment on a site like a Keep Trade Cut. Then we can have a conversation. But this is just pure trickery, and I'm not going to fall for it.
Okay.
I'm not going to fall for it. Do I believe that Roshan Johnson will outperform Bucky Irving over the next 3 years? Oh, you bet he will. And I would put money on it. I would put reputation on it. I would put fast draft and player profiler gear on it. I'll put whatever you want on it. I'll put my dick on it. I'll put everything on it, man. I'll put my balls on it. Everything's on.
I assumed
I'm everything. I'm all in on Roshan. But would I take that deal straight up? Of course not, because that's not the fucking market.
Well, I did have Roshan this week. I go with lesser rostered players. So Roshan is a top 5 ad this week because of how broken the Chicago backfield is.
He's the number one ad.
He's going to have an opportunity.
He's the number one ad because he's a workhorse. He's a real running back that can actually win you a league.
The number
Bucky
one
Irving
ad
ain't that.
is Sam Darnold. Well, Bucky Irving is way too rostered because we recommended him so highly after week 1 here at Player Profiler. Braylon out. We told people to add Jordan Mason for 20% in August. People love that. Jax, they love it. They send me thank you cards. Then we told people to add Braylon Allen. We told people to add Bucky Irving. Last week we told people to add Juwan Jennings. We told people to add a lot of these guys. But this week the number one redraft player to add that's available in a lot of leagues is Sam Darnold, who is playing out of his mind and is going to get you out of quarterback purgatory at a lot of places. That's the guy this week. That's my number one, Matt.
Can I defend
the
myself
chat,
here?
by the way, I just want to say to
myself?
everybody in the chat, I'm outnumbered 2-1. I've also been talking twice as much as these guys combined. But the chat has my back, and I'm actually very grateful. I'm very grateful, and I have rarely felt this kind of affinity for the audience as I do right now. It's just one comment after another supporting Roshan over Bucky Irving. These people, they know, they get it. They get the show. They get Player Profiler. They get the Breakout Finder. They understand what actually leads to winning fantasy leagues in the world.
Roshan Moss is probably a pretty good player. I don't disagree. But what I'm saying is in August, before the season, Bucky Irving and Roshan Johnson were the running back 55 and 53. So they were actually very close. And Roshan is moving up the boards, today. And I think they are pretty close. If you're saying Roshan's going to be the starting running back and the bell cow in Chicago, why would I have to pay you profit to go from Roshan to Bucky Irving? That's not a trick. It's an actual question as to who you think is going to be more productive this year. I think Roshan's a fine player, but I think you talk about being over your skis. I think you're way over your skis with Roshan. Roshan compares very favorably to a player like Zach Moss. And, Zach Moss came out unathletic, pretty big, very reliable, very durable, but not explosive. And that's where Roshan is.
No,
I think
Roshan's most similar to Ramondre Stevenson. Because Ramondre Stevenson can command 75 targets. Zach Moss cannot. Roshan can. That's the best comp for Roshan is Ramondre Stevenson.
I would agree with Matt that, and I would say that that's the argument for Roshan this year is Roshan is a guy who can get some every week he plays. He's going to be a floor play because he gets those targets, and anything on top is going to give you utility.
What if
like,
the
sort
offense
of like
turns a corner with Caleb in the second half?
I'll say like the one that's the thing
if
with Roshan.
Roshan can play left tackle, maybe.
Oh yeah, that would be. Listen, I mean, but you see with these backs that have size and pass catching ability, they don't have to be exceptional talents, and they can give us big time fantasy weeks if they can handle volume. Plus, they can handle targets. Zach Charbonnet right now is a guy where, I went out and tried to acquire him like 2 weeks ago. I think that I'm a little worried that things with once like the injury bug opens up with Ken Walker, we've seen it kind of multiple seasons where it's bothered him. Charbonnet, I traded, I'll tell you this one, this will get Matt real fired up. About a week ago, I traded Mike Shope, a friend of ours. I traded him in a $750 FFPC league. I traded him Isaiah Pacheco for Zach Charbonnet because I'm all about that business, and I'm all about moving on from these injured running backs, and I'm all about getting rid of this seventh round draft
after the injury.
After the injury.
He broke his leg, right?
Listen, Mike Shope is an NFL insider. Listen, I'm making deals with NFL insiders, guys. This is the voice of the Buffalo Bills, and I'm out here making trades with Mike. And we talked about it on his radio show. He had me on. We talked about the radio show and how like dynasty trades, like milkshakes can be shared and that kind of deal. So I am bullish on Zach Charbonnet, and I think the argument is, any of these backs that can give us like for like replacement value in terms of snaps, and they can catch the ball. Those are the kind of guys we want on our bench for dynasty rosters. So, like, Roshan's got an opportunity now because DeAndre Swift is so bad, and the offensive line being so bad actually boosts him a little bit because they can use him as a safety blanket underneath, sort of like Cole Kmet with Keenan Allen out of there has a little bit of a boost. Like, getting the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands as quickly as possible, that's sort of the best thing that the Bears can do right now.
I'm glad that you shared that with us because, I have a skewed perspective. I have to keep holding back all the scat back talk and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. Meanwhile, you're out here trading for Zach Charbonnet, which is a great process play. This is what I'm talking about. This makes me feel better. This makes me feel better that, yeah, you're the type of guy that you see a guy rip off a few long runs and you think you see a clear path to some significant touches, especially once the coaches come out and say this guy has earned it. I get the excitement. I understand it. You're human. But to know that how you're wired is that I'm going to take the guy with a broken leg and flip him for a guy with size and an all-purpose skill set who's currently the starter, that makes me sleep well at night.
I love high-value touches. I can't deny it. Jax knows this. I love these backs with that can catch passes and they can rip off long runs. That call me crazy. I love high-value touches.
Think about who the starter is in Kansas City now. Is he Jerick McKinnon? Right? Is he super satellite back X? No. It's a converted fullback. That's the direction the league is going, and that's my final position here. Is I want to make sure we correct the record here. The NFL is not going smaller right now. If anything, the NFL is going bigger.
In fairness, though, even Carson Steele's family did not think he would be in the NFL this year because they scheduled a wedding on a Sunday in the fall. So I'm just saying,
can we talk about that? Like how what is his sister doing? Like, when your brother makes couldn't they couldn't
no, they scheduled it a year ago or something like this. So like last year they were like, obviously you're not going to be in the NFL. Listen, just show up to the wedding, all right? Don't be such an idiot. Yeah.
The fall wedding scene in Indiana is apparently incredibly competitive, and you can't switch the date by like a week because your brother's playing in the NFL. Like, come on, I'm not all about that.
Yeah, they were like he's no Malik Nabers.
Yeah, no, he's not.
Right. You see that?
Who watches the
double pivot, the double segue. We should get distracted again, then we'll do it again. We'll do a third Malik Nabers segue.
All right, let's talk about Malik Nabers because my guy Jax got a lot of heat coming out with the I believe you put him in the top 4 in your you put him at number 3 and you took a lot of heat. I equally got some heat when I traded Garrett Wilson for Malik Nabers and a third right before the season in a pretty high stakes FFPC league.
Brilliant.
And it's sort of like, and we also talked about it this year all summer long, where that was sort of my bold take, is we're going to have 2 rookies finish as wide receiver 1s. All these people got so angry because they said, how can Malik Nabers finish as a wide receiver 1 with Daniel Jones, with that train wreck of an offense? And in the NFL, life finds a way when you are a truly talented player like Malik Nabers. Life finds a way, and offensive coordinators have self-preservation. If that guy's there, you're going to get him the football. That this guy might save Brian Daboll's job. He might save Daniel Jones's job. He's that good. He's insane.
Yeah. Well, he certainly shouldn't be saving Joe Shane's job. What a ding-dong he is. But at the end of the day, no, Malik Nabers, I had him at wide receiver 1, in this class, and took a lot of heat for that. People thought it was a bit. It's like, wait, what are you talking about? Have you seen this guy play? Like, ultimately the metrics on him were off the charts. He fell into the very, very top tier of our UN wide receivers model that we have. Him and Marvin Harrison Jr. scored exactly the same, right there with players like CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase historically. And then you watch him play, and he's so multifaceted. He erases angles of defensive backs. He did all that in the SEC, absolutely dominating. He played alongside what appears to be another really, really high-level wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr., and again was that elite in terms of target earning, run after catch, breaking tackles, contested catch, everything. He was really that good. And then he comes out, and you're right. He makes Daniel Jones almost look good. Like there was the catch on the sideline where everybody's covered, including even Malik Nabers on this particular play. And Daniel Jones, you can just see it. It's like, dude, I'm just throwing it to that dude. I'm just throwing it to that dude, and we'll see what happens. And what happens is he comes down with a catch almost every single time. He is legit. I put him in the God tier. I feel like it's Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, then give me Malik Nabers. I'll take him over Jamar Chase. I love Jamar Chase, but I'd take him over Jamar Chase just because I think he's that good and he's that young. Malik Nabers can't be any higher on him at this point.
You know who Malik Nabers is? Malik Nabers is, you take Odell Beckham, you take Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, all the best receivers from LSU history. You put them all together. They all step into this particle acceleration chamber. The door opens, smoke clears. There's Malik Nabers. He is everything. Yeah. He's everything. Why can't we just put him at wide receiver 1 and get it over with in Dynasty?
You can. You could do that.
I think the one argument would be, and I think maybe you would agree with me on this, Jax, but I'm not sure, is that he doesn't quite have the trade equity of Justin Jefferson at this point. Because Justin Jefferson, you've seen it for a few years, and trade equity matters for us in Dynasty rankings. It should matter for you for your Dynasty roster as well. But it's all splitting hairs here, Matt. It's like at the end of the day, Nabers is right there. And I'll take it a step.
What about Lamb, though? Lamb was a consensus. The new consensus. Now, he never outperformed Justin Jefferson.
Well, except last year.
Except last year.
Well.
Except last year. Yes.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, they did.
In the second half, particular game situations where, yes, he had a few spike weeks that really carried the day.
I mean, no.
A few.
Matt,
16 spike weeks.
Lamb earned it. I think we're at
I think that it was interesting, right? It was interesting how quick the pivot was. All Justin Jefferson did was get injured.
Yes.
Right? That's all it was. On a per game basis, it wasn't like a huge difference.
I think the big difference for Justin Jefferson is he's attached to an elite quarterback.
Yeah, he is.
You're welcome.
You go.
You're welcome.
No, and at the end of listen, guys, we can joke about it, but Sam Darnold's already earned himself a bag. Sam Darnold might be throwing passes to Malik Nabers next year.
Please, God.
You can already see it in your head. They decide to go with J.J. McCarthy. Sam Darnold leads them to the playoffs. Sam Darnold finishes as a QB1, and they say, we've got this guy on a rookie contract. It's the fiscally responsible thing to go with J.J. McCarthy next year coming off of an injury. And Sam Darnold signs with the New York Giants as they're going to box themselves out of a not really inspiring group of 2025 quarterbacks. And the Giants end up signing Sam Darnold as a free agent. And Sam Darnold immediately starts throwing passes to Malik Nabers. you can just see it in your head right now. So yeah, I mean, like Sam Darnold, what a start for him. But just getting back to Malik Nabers, I think, guys, there's a scenario here this year, and this is going to be like the really out there call. But first of all, it's nuts that Nabers has gained this much dynasty value without Marvin Harrison Jr. losing an ounce of dynasty value. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. looks like we want him to. He's got 3 touchdowns in 3 games. He had a 35% target share. Last week he had double-digit targets. He looks everything like a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. And yet Malik Nabers is just this unstoppable force. And we've seen rookie wide. We kept talking about this on the Sonic Truth podcast. I know I talked about this when I went on your podcast, Jax, but we've seen it where every single year, 3 out of the last 4 years, we've seen rookie wide receivers finish as top 5 scorers, but we've never seen a rookie wide receiver finish as wide receiver 1 overall. Is there a chance that Malik Nabers just goes so nuclear this year that he can hold on to this and he goes full on peak Josh Gordon and he has a bunch of 30-point weeks and he actually gives us a wide receiver 1 overall season as a rookie and breaks the mold? I don't think it's a non-zero chance right now that he does it, based on the way that the usage is against Washington and Cleveland. And we heard all week that Cleveland was going to be the test for Malik Nabers. Now he's going up against a really hard defense, and Cleveland could completely shut the Giants out. That was what we heard all week long. And he passes the test in flying colors. And I'll throw out the other thing with Malik Nabers that was so impressive. Everybody saw the touchdown catches, and they were unbelievably impressive. But they had a 4th, and I believe it was 4th and 3, maybe 4th and 2 conversion at like midfield. They go for it. Brian Dable's playing to win this game. They go for it, and what do? They run an end around for Malik Nabers, and this dude it was nothing for him. He goes and gets you 4 yards on a rushing play. The guy is so good. It's unbelievable. So that's what I'm absolutely rooting for, because all offseason long on all my Dynasty podcasts, I said, why can't we get a rookie to finish as wide receiver 1 overall? This is the year if we're going to get one. Marvin Harrison Jr. gets you 18 touchdowns, or Malik Nabers gets 165 targets. And now we're in a situation where Malik Nabers is like right there. So it's so exciting times for us as dynasty managers. And Matt, you bring up like, guys, it's like a unbelievable time for us with these true alpha wide receivers, with Justin Jefferson playing at the same peak, Justin Jefferson playing at the same time as Nabers and Harrison Jr. coming up, with Ceedee Lamb, and then we've still got guys like Jamar Chase. Like it's unbelievable time to be a dynasty manager at the wide receiver position.
Now I know you guys, you want to zoom into these small samples, a handful of games, like with Bucky Irving. I can just tell you, Ceedee Lamb averaged 5.5 catches the first 5 weeks last year. So if you were just looking at the Bucky Irving sample size from last year, you would have had no idea that Ceedee Lamb was about to melt faces. So are we getting fooled again? Like with me just now, did I potentially get fooled? Like, hey, we should just move Malik Nabers ahead of Ceedee Lamb. I was proposing that. I don't see us moving him ahead of Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson performing at the level he is with Sam Darnold is just as impressive as what Malik Nabers is doing with Daniel Jones. I'm not sold on Sam Darnold being a top 20 quarterback in the league like many other people are. Like, I can't believe they took this guy off the scrap heap and they didn't. Shanahan didn't know what he had, and the Jets didn't know what they had, and the Panthers didn't know what they had. Or maybe Justin Jefferson is the reason, just like Malik Nabers is the reason why Daniel Jones is looking anything other than incompetent. But Justin Jefferson has like the resume of all resumes, like an 1,800-yard season, and he's still in his prime. And we look at a dynasty window, a production window of 3 to 4 years. Justin Jefferson is 25. He's actually younger than Ceedee Lamb. So no argument, right? If Justin Jefferson is your wide receiver 1 and he supplants Ceedee Lamb, no argument from Jax either?
So when I was evaluating Malik Nabers, his target earning potential was what I figured I'd see. And once you see it, it's kind of like, okay, we're there. We don't have to think about it anymore. And then, he's able to perform and not only earn targets, but then be efficient on targets in a New York Giants pass offense. You can do whatever you want with him. I do agree that it's very, very hard to move him past Justin Jefferson because Jefferson is so good. But it's at least an argument. The point is that if Malik Nabers is as good as we think he is, he probably should be. But because it's so early, it's really Bayesian to probably be a little bit more conservative with your rankings. But ultimately, at this point, you're splitting hairs because, if you're on the clock and you have that pick, I guess, okay, now you've got the decision. But really, the lesson here is that, if you can buy, and when I say low, buy low on Malik Nabers in any way where it's just like the Garrett Wilson situation where you can maybe, move players in that range plus something small to get to Nabers, you've got to do it.
So a month from now, we both agree that the Ceedee Lamb ranking and lifetime value slightly softer than Justin Jefferson's. We agree with that. And a month from now, if trends continue, Justin Jefferson will continue to be locked in as the wide receiver 1, but we could see, and I'm just saying, we're being realists, and this is absolutely Bayesian. This is absolutely conservative. You all heard how conservative I was about the running back position. I'm not less conservative about the wide receiver position, right? We all have lived through the overvaluation of receivers like Juju Smith-Schuster. I don't know anyone that was called Juju Smith-Schuster being flushed out of the league by this point. No one saw that coming. No. It is a fragile position. You don't want to get out over your skis, as we talked about. And yet, everything you're saying about Malik Nabers is dead on. Everything that Theo was saying about Malik Nabers is dead on. And a month from now, if trends continue and you look up and Malik Nabers is the wide receiver 2 in Dynasty, it goes Jefferson Nabers, that would feel right to me.
I want to push back on one thing we're talking about with Ceedee, though, guys. I think that the one argument sort of against Ceedee, and this is sort of like it doesn't really matter because it's all fantasy points, but Nabers is not getting the same slot usage as Ceedee, where Ceedee, the people are like Ceedee shouldn't have been wide receiver 1 overall. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it's like Ceedee gave us that wide receiver 1 overall season with all those spike weeks, leads the league in targets, leads the league in receptions, second in touchdown grabs. I believe he was second in yardage or first in yardage right there. But he does get an advantage where certain things are manufactured for him, where he's getting a plus 50% slot snap share. That would be the one argument against Lamb is these guys like Jefferson are having to do it on the outside. They're not giving him as many manufactured looks and targets, and he's truly this unbelievable talent. So that would be sort of the argument against Lamb. I just feel bad about docking Lamb when he gave us that insane season last year. He's still in his prime. I think it's really more of it's sort of a splitting hairs. If you still want to dig your heels in on Ceedee Lamb, he's still absolutely in that God tier. And he still, guys, could turn around and give us a wide receiver 1 overall year. Matt, you talked about it last year, where Dallas decides to self-scout. And when did Ceedee Lamb go nuts? Right after the bye week. They had the early bye, and they made that decision. Now what just happened? They lost 2 consecutive home games to Baltimore and New Orleans. Why don't they come out next week and say we're going to target Ceedee Lamb 15 times every week? It worked last year. That was our best thing we're good at. Let's give the ball to Ceedee Lamb every single time we have on offense. So, yeah, it's not to get us too off subject, but
I don't see as many games against the Rams, Washington, and the Lions with decimated secondaries like Ceedee Lamb enjoyed last year either. Regardless, he's a top 5 Dynasty wide receiver. He's probably going to be a top 3 Dynasty wide receiver by the end of the year. The guy that could supplant him is Malik Nabers, and then also it's possible that Jamar Chase finally put together a good game in week 3. If Jamar Chase can string these together, then he would also be a threat. So I think at worst, Ceedee Lamb would be wide receiver 4. I don't see a world.
Marv, though,
I don't
Matt,
see a world, Theo. I don't see a world where Marvin Harrison Jr. and his sub 50% catch rate is passing CeeDee Lamb in the Dynasty rankings. No fucking way.
Probably not. Probably not. But I think at the end of the year, it's the final stat line is going to tell the story there. And at the end of the day, Marvin Harrison Jr. is an elite touchdown earner. He should have 4 at this point. And at the end of the day, there's an opportunity where he could lead the league in touchdown receptions this year. Like Marvin Harrison Jr., again, he hasn't lost a single ounce of dynasty value. He's still going to go about where he went in dynasty startups next year. And he just happens to be playing with Malik Nabers, who's just doing more on a worse situation team with a much worse quarterback. So, like, for me, it's like I'm not going to dock Marvin Harrison Jr. because Malik Nabers is playing so well. This is sort of where I'm at. So I don't think it's a non-zero chance, but I would say that Harrison Jr. should be behind those guys in the rankings. The question, then you're talking about also sort of Amon-Ra. Where do you put Amon-Ra now you're in a situation, Matt? Because you've been the biggest Amon-Ra guy for years. And Amon-Ra
ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr.?
They're about the same in terms of startup value, in my opinion, next year. About the same.
Marvin Harrison Jr., much riskier. Odunze, he had a big game, right? It's funny. It's funny how fickle people are. There's such an exhale moment when Marvin Harrison Jr. finally has a big game on, low receptions, big long plays, some of them arguably fluky.
Come on, Matt. Okay, and how about the third touchdown where Kyler missed him and he was so wide open in the end zone? Just stop it. Just stop it with the fluky. Just stop it. Anybody listening on the pod?
Odunze is the real deal. If there was a guy that I would be aggressively targeting, going to the mattresses to find whatever I could to go get him, whatever ammunition I can get, I want Odunze. He had a big game, but Keenan Allen was out. You could rationalize it. This is it, man. This is it. One more big game from Odunze, and it's over. You're not going to get him. He's just going to slip. That rope is going to slip right through your hands.
Jax, where did Odunze fall in your updated wide receiver rankings?
Good question. Let me look.
And while you're looking, I'll throw out one stat for you guys. There's 3 players in the NFL right now with 300 air yards on the year. It's the 3 rookies. How about that? Odunze air yards are right there, Matt.
Say that again.
I'll send out the. I'll retweet. I forgot, and I think it might have been one of the. I think it might have been Ian Hartitz on that tweet. So
let me ask you a question there. Let me ask you a question there. So you got those 3 rookie receivers. You got 3 quarterbacks. Of those rookie receivers, whose quarterback is most likely to improve and connect on some of those air yards moving forward?
Once the offensive line gets better, Caleb Williams is not going to be like some historical Bryce Young bust. Like people who are panicking right now. Like, do I think that the Bears would like to switch things up and draft Jaden Daniels after last night, though? I do. I would like to turn around one share of Caleb where I could trade it for a Jaden Daniels. And I know, Jax, you were there when we drafted this summer, but Jaden Daniels, like Matt and I, like we usually have like some sort of a chat on Monday nights where we go over the dynasty rankings, and like Jaden Daniels after last night. Not to get us off track because it's a Odunze conversation, but yes, I do think Caleb Williams, if the offensive line can get it together, if they can figure things out in the second half of the year. And, I will say, like, it's frustrating watching the Chicago right now because I know Caleb Williams is better than this. This is not a Bryce Young situation. This is he's not playing well. Caleb's not playing well. I'm not saying he's playing well, but he's not getting any favors here. And that Texans game was unfair for a young quarterback to see that sort of pressure where they should have. First of all, Matt Eberflus, why is he back? Why is Matt Eberflus still coaching Caleb? They had the opportunity to go get Dave Canales or a guy like that to right the ship. And instead they bring back Eberflus, who's got a lame duck coach, Matt. Lame duck
and then
coach.
Put him with Waldron, who's awful. It's just
a lame duck OC. So Jax, go ahead,
awful.
cook.
Yeah, no, it's awful. I mean, the offensive line is bad, and when you have a situation like that where the offensive line is bad, you can just imagine Bill Belichick would scheme a way to protect those tackles. Tight ends, running backs chipping, misdirection, any sort of way to slow down the rush. And you watch the Chicago Bears, and they're basically just like either hand it off to DeAndre Swift straight up the middle, or like standard drop back or shotgun plays for Caleb, and they're just putting them right on the target and letting them rush through the Swiss cheese offensive line. It's just not it's not good. Now, that being said, they also haven't played well, but it's really, really difficult to figure out, what's going on in Chicago because of how bad the offensive line has performed. I am hopeful for Rome Odunze, which is where this conversation started. I think Rome, I've got him right around still wide receiver 15. Chalk and I are in a league, and it's a fairly big money league, and we hold both Caleb Odunze stack, which we feel good about. Obviously not this year. We're kind of scuffling along. We're still okay. But, someone sent us a trade, T. Higgins for Rome Odunze in 2 seconds. And we were like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean? We're like,
what?
No, absolutely. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
absolutely
this
not.
Is the sentiment, right? We still have
The
the
buy
sentiment.
low.
The buy low is still available to you. But really, I mean, he's going to end up ahead of A.J. Brown, ahead of Chris Olave, ahead of Jalen Waddle. He's going to be ahead of all those guys. He's going to be a top 10 dynasty wide receiver by the end of the year. The only other receiver who has the type of upward trajectory that he has is Rashee Rice.
Yeah, Rashee's already there.
Rashee's there right now. Rashee's, if you just look at his last 9 games, last 10 games scoring, he's there. He's already an alpha. He's already a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, and anybody not ranking him there is doing it incorrectly. And I'll say that, he's already
my larger point is most of these receivers are falling.
Yeah.
Right? There's not many receivers that are rising in this tier. Brown's falling. Garrett Wilson is underwhelmed. Chris Olave finally had a good game. Jalen Waddle's been a big disappointment. DJ Moore has not fully delivered. Drake London has been a disappointment. Tyreek Hill's been a disappointment. Devontae Smith just got rocked out of his body. It was really brutal to watch. Brandon Ayuk has looked rusty. Puka Nakua's injured. You go down the board, you have 3 risers, and it's Nico Collins, Rome Odunze, and Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
Yes. That's fair.
And they're crashing the top 10, these guys.
And Jameson Williams?
Well, Jameson,
it's hard to find. It's hard to find a wide receiver who's actually exceeding expectations. You just have to keep scrolling and scrolling. I scroll. Yes, there it is. Jameson Williams. Jesus Christ. This is horrible.
Yep, Jameson
Rashid
Williams.
Shaheed. What?
I think that the way that you have to the way to acquire a Odunze is one of those year 3 guys, Matt, and it's just sort of the believe in the process here, where we've seen these guys play a long enough period of time, and sort of pick your least favorite of the 3 and start there. And depending on the league, there's going to be managers that snap accept that. You could also potentially ask for Rome Plus, and there's going to be managers who say, you know what? I have a chance to pivot to a Drake London or a Chris Olave. There's going to be managers who do that, because Odunze, not everybody's as high as we are on Odunze. Like at Player Profiler, and I know, Jax, you're high on him, but if you look across the sentiment, there's going to be other people who rank who have Odunze sort of behind all of those year 3 guys. And we're talking about
traditionally, look, we're getting spoiled with Malik Nabers, but traditionally one of the best hacks in Dynasty is to go ahead and trade for rookies early in the season. Think about JT. Think about some of these players that came in and were like, even Nick Chubb, first 2 games, he didn't do anything. They didn't even play him. We're like, I mean, if you'd have just been hyper reactive in those moments, you would have sold, and I think there's going to be managers who are like, oh, Odunze ain't shit. Let me get Olave. I'll pay, Odunze plus to get there. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to try and attack buying Odunze, even the way that we were approached, which was laughable to some degree, but still, I thought it was a smart offer, because if we aren't who we are and have that long-term, outlook, maybe that would have seemed like a good trade. It didn't to me, but I could at least understand how it could fashion itself to be attractive to someone who's 1-2 or 0-3 and watching Odunze not perform, like, fuck this guy. Let me get some production. So I think at the end of the day, there are definite opportunities to buy low on these rookies early in their career, early in year one.
I've got the perfect trade. You guys ready to hear it?
Yes.
I got the perfect trade. We got a rookie running back that's getting lots of hype, who is never going to be a primary back in the league for any length of time. And we've got a wide receiver who's about to turn 27, who has a lot of brand equity. People love the explosiveness. He really tantalizes the imagination. I'm sending DK Metcalf and Bucky Irving for Rome Odunze.
That's good.
That's fair. I think that the Rome Odunze manager might want more, depending on how they value him.
But it's a good offer.
That's a good starting
solid,
point.
Matt.
No one's laughing at that start. No one's laughing at that, right?
I'm
giving up Bucky Irving, guys.
No,
I'm giving up the great Bucky Irving.
Matt, the player with the most brand equity that has never realized it is Drake London. So you might as well, obviously, if you have Drake London plus Bucky Irving, of course they're going to say yes, because of the great.
Well, isn't
Drake
that a straight
London.
up deal? You don't have to give up Bucky Irving for that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do that straight up, and I would do that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yes, I would do that. The question is, knowing that Rome is going to pass him eventually, and that he has no quarterback for the foreseeable future after this year, the conversation about Garrett Wilson versus a guy like Rome Odunze is about to be here.
Yeah, I don't think it's that far off right now. I think there's an argument that buying Garrett Wilson right now is not the worst thing to do either, because Garrett Wilson's a little bit beat up because Allen Lazard has 3 touchdown catches on the year, but those could have gone to Garrett Wilson. So I like Garrett Wilson would be the one of the 3 that I would least like to move off of my dynasty roster.
Oh, no. He's in a different tier. Yes, he's. Yeah. I mentioned him because he is the friction point. Because beyond him, we're at, like, I'm on Rod Nabers. Of course, you're never doing that. But that's London's, the friction point. I said let's skip to the end of this. I think the 3 of us would all take Odunze for London, which is a hot take, and you're not going to find 3 podcasters in any other dynasty show that would do that. So that right there is noteworthy. But I'm saying we'll skip to the end, and let's call it mid-November. We'll be looking up, and those deals are going to start happening. Like the where someone would prefer Odunze to Wilson, and that might be viewed as a win now move to go get Garrett Wilson. But then what ends up happening is Odunze outperforms him the rest of the year. And then one guy has like an improving Caleb Williams, especially getting the new coaching staff. We all saw Hard Knocks. It was embarrassing. I've seen Hard Knocks. My daughter loves that show for some reason. And so we were always watching every episode of Hard Knocks. And to see it in contrast to, say, the Miami Hard Knocks or some of these other Hard Knocks episodes, even what little we got to see of Dayball in the Giants Hard Knocks, which was an off-season Hard Knocks, more about the front office, it was painfully obvious that Eberflus and Waldron were outclassed by most of their peers in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no confidence level in those guys, and I just feel like it's sort of like the option to reset. What Washington did this offseason was they go out and they get Dan Quinn, and they also hire Cliff Kingsbury, who was not the Cliff Kingsbury's not the greatest offensive mind, but we've seen the sample size of what he can do with a mobile quarterback, and he certainly didn't hold Kyler Murray back from fantasy production. Had some seasons where he won. It was a good fit for Cliff Kingsbury to get Jaden Daniels on the right track And I don't think enough people talked about that this offseason. And on the contrary, Chicago kept Eberflus, who was a coach who doesn't make anybody confident. And then they go and they have this sort of uninspired hire, with Waldron. And there's so many offensive coordinators this offseason when you talk about Clint Kubiak, you talk about Liam Cohen, you talk about Ryan Grubb, and guys that sort of at least are innovative and have a different approach to things. And we're seeing like some new ideas where Waldron is like the definition of recycling in the NFL. And those guys rarely work. So for me, Caleb's at a disadvantage, and I don't know. It's a really rough one for Bears fans. I have a number of friends who are Bears fans, and they are like depressed right now. This was
Did you hear what Adam Levitan calls Waldron? He calls him fraudron.
That's great. I wish we came up with that.
He's a fraud.
He's very bad. Terrible. Very, very bad at his job. I call him Shane very bad. I call him Shane. I call him Shane. I call him Shane. Hey, dude, you're bad at your job. Stop sucking.
That's creative.
Friend.
That's Shane piece of shit drum that rolls off the tongue.
It's all getting worse. All right, so we love rookies. That's very clear. We clearly are very bullish on rookies. Jax, agree. Brock Bowers, tight end 1.
Yes, easily too.
Easily, right?
Yes.
Easily. Okay.
Yeah.
So
yes.
We're moving on from that. That's easy. Let's just do a quick rapid fire price check on some players and some situations to close it out.
Love it.
And I believe we have the proper sound effect for this.
Go ahead.
Can we get a Law and Order sound effect as well, just to add suspense to it, please, Matt? The dun dun dun.
I had one agenda and one agenda only for this show, which was to play that sound effect for Jax. That was really, this whole show is really just a big, it's just a big production to get to that point. Yes, Theo.
Sound effect. Thank you. Now we're ready.
Rapid fire, guys. You ready?
Yes.
Justin Fields, price check. Up, down, same.
Way up.
Increased from the summer, without a doubt. I mean, it's hard to take that job away from him. And we saw last week, finally, a fantasy-friendly game. So Justin Fields' price check is up. But he's also a difficult one to price, though, Jax, because no one's given up a first for him, and you're not taking a second for him. So it takes some creativity to do trades for Justin Fields in Superflex.
I guess what I'm getting at, though, with Justin Fields is the thing that we were kind of hoping for with the, when he was in Chicago, is we were just hoping, it's kind of funny because I said last year, I hope he goes to Atlanta where he can play in the Arthur Smith offense. And somehow or another, he kind of got there, but even a better situation because he's also now with Mike Tomlin as well, who I think they're basically managing him correctly. Justin Fields has a pretty elite skill set, but there's certain things he doesn't do well, and they're literally coaching around those things. He's only got 1 turnover in 3 games. Their defense is the best defense in the league easily, and so therefore Justin Fields can go out there and just play his game. And how can you turn around and start Russell Wilson with a straight face? They're not going to unless something really bad happens, right? So this is now Justin Fields' job, and it could be his sort of job, like career type thing. This could be a 2, 3, 4 year window with him in Pittsburgh. I don't know.
We all know they stole him from the Bears.
Bingo.
They stole him. That was theft. The Bears put him on the market, and there were no takers, right? The market was frozen for Justin Fields, and the Steelers were like, I guess we'll give you a day 3 pick for a stud quarterback. Would he just go 25 for 32 and he ran in a touchdown? My goodness. What a that's just brilliant front office work, and that's what Pittsburgh does. Pittsburgh
so
is one of the best managed
or
teams.
Justin Fields in Dynasty.
Yeah, and when you see it, one of the best managed teams in the league that is, has a long history of making wise, conservative front office decisions, when they go out and acquire Justin Fields, that made me feel better about drafting Justin Fields in startups and acquiring him in trades. Sam Darnold.
Sam Darnold, I'll say this. Right before the season, I traded a 3rd rounder and and Jermaine Burton in a 3rd rounder to our own Dan Williamson and Andrew Schellenberg in a Superflex league. And Sam Darnold, I got him for like QB depth. And now I have a team that I think is like, it's the same team that I acquired Charbonnet. So I'm like pushing the chips in. I have Kyler Murray. And now I feel like with Sam Darnold, I have something that's going to last.
Okay, you're not going to screw this team up by trading for Bucky Irving, are you?
Already has him.
I would love some Bucky on this team, but I'm okay. I got Zach Charbonnet. I'm chilling. I got an RB1 this week.
I'm saying you traded for the right running back. Trevor Lawrence.
You mean fancy Ryan Tannehill? Trevor Lawrence, of all the dynasty quarterbacks this year, no player has lost more dynasty value in the first 3 weeks of the year than Trevor Lawrence. Bryce Young. Okay, thank you. Bryce and Will Levis certainly doesn't look like the dude at all. But in terms of like the guys who we had ranked as like the high end QB2s, and Trevor Lawrence in some sites will be like quarterback 11. He goes somewhere between quarterback 11 and quarterback 16, depending on your site. But at the end of the day, you would take a much older Dak Prescott than him. You would take Jordan Love over him. You would take a ton of these guys over him. Trevor Lawrence is a non-impactful player in fantasy football. He had one strong season. He can't overcome bad situations. He doesn't elevate people. And at the end of the day, it's just a bad look with Trevor Lawrence. The argument for Trevor Lawrence will be he gives you long-term starting ability. Someone's going to give Trevor Lawrence a job if he moves on from Jacksonville, but you're talking about more like the Derek Carr tier of quarterback in terms of like long-term starting ability. That's his best trait. Does nothing for you. Purgatory player at best for your Superflex roster.
Okay, so for me, I love the dichotomy of the Trevor Lawrence, which was the number 1 overall pick, the chosen one quarterback versus the Mr. Irrelevant, the Brock Purdy. And they've been adjacent in a lot of dynasty rankings. And to see Brock Purdy, sure, struggling without any receivers, but putting up 3 touchdowns to Jawan Jennings, knowing that Trevor Lawrence could never fucking do that ever, is just makes the world right. I love seeing Brock Purdy now and forever ahead of Trevor Lawrence in the dynasty rankings. It's a beautiful thing. I would also, at this point, argue that you could say Sam Darnold should be ahead of Deshaun Watson.
100 million%.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad we're on the same page with this. I mean that some of these well-regarded players have certainly fallen. And also no coincidence that I'm picking Clemson, the Clemson quarterbacks, the overrated QBU. When will Michael Penix overtake Anthony Richardson?
That I don't see happening. Richardson is much younger than him. Richardson, like with a slow start through 3 games, but we've seen spike.
It's a very slow start.
Game 1, there was a lot of positives for fantasy managers. We see the downfield connections. I'll say that Josh Downs coming back, we saw last week Josh Downs was on the field almost the whole time, and Josh Downs had a 90% slot participation. I think that this team is going to figure some things out on offense. Richardson is one of the 2 youngest starting quarterbacks in football right now, along with Caleb Williams. Like Richardson, it's a micro loss. Like he's behind Jaden Daniels in the Dynasty rankings right now. If you're doing it correctly, you can make an argument that he should be a little closer to like the Kyler Murray tier, but it reaches a point where you really can't drop him that much, Matt. You just can't drop him that much because of the youth, because of the rushing ability. He's insulated as a starter, and I just can't really make an argument to go too low on Anthony Richardson despite uninspiring start to the season.
No, I mentioned that because the 2 quarterbacks that were drafted more for mobility, or at least mobility was the big premium that got them drafted where they were drafted in recent years, with Richardson last year, Penix this year. The Penix will be rising throughout this year. As we see Kirk Cousins fade, you just show flaccid arm strength. The Penix is rising up, is every week up and up and up and up, growing excitement, right? Tantalizing upside, weaponry, even though Drake London has been overrated his entire NFL career. So that would be probably the wildest swing in the Dynasty rankings that you could ever imagine, is that at some point Penix takes over, plays very well, and delivers on the potential of a Anthony Richardson, and Anthony Richardson continues to struggle for the rest of the year, and they eventually converge.
I think you're right. I think all the fans in Atlanta are really excited to put the Penix in.
They want it. Yeah, they definitely want
Once
it bad.
they put the Penix in, they'll get excited.
It's very exciting. I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I mean, it's an arousing thought.
Right. I will say though, Michael Penix is actually the closest thing. Now, this is the closest thing to a CJ Stroud. In other words, he was dotting up those receivers in Washington. And look, he's old, he's lefty, he's injured. There's a lot of negatives there. He's not just straight up the same prospect as CJ Stroud. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about play style. I mean, this guy can really deliver the football to all quadrants of the field. He's really talented. And so for that reason, I think he has an opportunity. Look, Cousins kind of saved himself a little bit in these last 2 games. I mean, game 1 looked like he was going to be pulled very, very quickly. My take has always been that Michael Penix is going to find his way onto the field sooner rather than later because of the Atlanta fans, the Atlanta coaches, just the Atlanta infrastructure. I mean, the only person devoted to Cousins is Arthur Blank's pocketbook. Other than that, nobody else is like, we need this guy. I'd say if anything, they're emotionally invested in Michael Penix. And so the groundswell will grow if Atlanta can't win a few games. If they end up, 2-4, 2-5, he can't last that. Michael Penix will be in.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I agree. Play style wise, Penix actually closer to Stroud than Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson is very unique, very
raw.
There's no way with my narrative. There's no way Stroud is ever going to converge with Penix. But Theo is saying, most importantly, that he doesn't have a big concerns about Anthony Richardson. Like you think Anthony Richardson's going to bounce? You're not worried because I've talked to some more casual fans. And they're very worried about Richardson.
Though there's certainly a lot of worries with Richardson. I think there's certain worries with a lot of analysts where is he good? And I think there's some worries with the Colts that maybe this team is going to struggle a little bit more this year. We've certainly seen it where they can't stop the run. That Green Bay game was insane.
Unless they play Chicago.
Yeah, unless they play Chicago, and then everything sort of looks good. But I'm of the opinion that it's way too early for us to get too over the top with big rankings adjustments with him. Like he took a knock. He's again behind Jaden Daniels. He's a little bit further down at Player Profiler, but he's got like an insulation point, Matt, where he still has such appeal as a fantasy prospect, and he still has such youth on his side. But Penix, I'll go back to your Penix point. The next 3 games are going to be massive for Penix because they play the Saints, they play the Panthers, and they play the Buccaneers in 3 straight games. So they have 3 divisional games. They are a Saquon Barkley reception away from being 0-3 on the season. And if the wheels start falling off against these NFC South opponents, you're going to see Michael Penix. And then who do they play after those 3? They play Seattle, who looks like one of the better teams in the NFC right now. So they have 3 divisional games and then a tough NFC opponent in Seattle. If they go like 0-4, 1-3 in that stretch, you're going to see the rookie in there. 100%. Yeah. It's over for Kirk.
Penix for Trevor Lawrence straight up.
Sure. If I'm a rebuilder, sure. I'm going to take the risk on that. If I'm rebuilding, the only argument for Lawrence is long-term starting job. It's not a spike. When I look at Penix, I have indoor games attached to Bijan Robinson, attached to Drake London, attached to Kyle Pitts, and I feel like there is some room for growth there. Now, I would want to get a plus on top of there.
If I'm going to move, we had this conversation already. I'm not pulling a rhetorical trick on you. I'm just saying.
You tell me
if you were in a startup and trades weren't allowed, and you had to have a quarterback, you might actually grab Penix.
Penix in a second.
Love it. Okay, we're in rapid fire mode, guys. I think we forgot.
Can you play the sound effect again to remind me?
I need Law and Order and guns and Law and Order.
Oh yeah, that's right. There it is.
We suck. We're insulting the sensibility and the auditory senses of our audience, and I'm ashamed.
Yeah.
On to running backs. Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, feeling pretty good about these guys. Just buy both.
Yes.
Okay. Kyron Williams, Blake Corum, buy low on Corum.
It's contingent. It's a pure contingent play. I think the move is actually move Blake Corum to try to get Braylon Allen, Bucky Irving, somebody with a little more juice and a little more life.
Okay, that's wrong. Don't do that. Please don't move Blake Corum. Why? No. This is the time to buy. This is a buy low situation with Blake Corum.
But it's a contingent play. He's not going to get any touches unless Kyron Williams gets hurt. You're not going to see Blake Corum because Kyron Williams owns that job.
For now.
Yes.
Another issue is that when the 199-pound running back does get elevated, if he is blessed with a huge workload, he will break down. So it's a paradox. You're always, if you don't have the foundational bell cow profile, you will be caught in a paradox. And those of us that have Aaron Jones, like I have a lot of Aaron Jones, right? And I fear it every week. I got exactly what I wanted. I'm getting all the touches, and I'm living in fear that he's going to go down. And that's what's going to happen to Kyron Williams by Blake Corum.
Matt has to fear every single Sunday for the last 5 years. He wakes up in a cold sweat about his Aaron Jones shares.
James Conner, Trey Benson. Are we feeling like Trey Benson may not happen?
I am still of the opinion that buying low on Trey Benson is the move because you're paying significantly less than you did during rookie draft season. And if James Conner misses time, Trey Benson will be the one in there because Amari DiMercato is a limited back.
Thank God you're saying this. Oh my
Trey Benson, Matt. We were team Trey Benson.
God.
We love speed scores. We love that speed score.
Trey Benson is an actual buy low because also of that offensive environment. Obviously in Los Angeles with the Rams, Corum Boy, oh boy. Yeah, they love themselves some Kyron, and there's all sorts of issues with the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. You could go on down the list, but I think with James Conner in front of him, a player who has actually gotten hurt despite his big frame, will likely get hurt again. He's, you're welcome. But yeah, I think Trey Benson is a real buy low.
Okay. Tajay Spears, buy low? Okay. Stash
That
Kamani
window-
Vidal?
I'm okay stashing him it depends on your dynasty format, but yeah, if I'm not like abandoning ship. I bought high on J.K. Dobbins because of the utility on a team the other day, and that's the sort of team where I would like to have a Kamani Vidal. If you're going to invest in the LA running back, I think you can double up because the shelf life potential for Dobbins to sort of go to zero is there. But I'm just enjoying the Dobbins show while it's lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep enjoying it.
Yeah,
so I'm assuming, based on your sensibilities, Theo, that you're trading a first-round pick for Tyler Beatty.
No, not at all. But he was in my waiver wire. So waiver wired, we talked about Tyler Beatty, and it's actually pronounced bidet, which we found out this weekend.
Stop it.
It's not. At Missouri, he didn't correct anybody. Didn't correct anybody at all in his NFL career. But this offseason, he wanted all the media to know that his last name is pronounced like the thing over in Europe that cleans your ass, bidet.
Does he know what that? Does he know what that is?
Tyler Bidet, and Matt use the sound effect. It's Tyler Bidet.
No, it's not.
I swear to you, it's Tyler Bidet. He wanted to clarify it.
Did anybody ask him if he knows what a bidet is? Like, that's an immediate follow-up question. The media fails us again.
He's the Robert Tonyan of our time, where we find out after like 3 years of his career that it's not Robert Tonyan, it's Tunyon. And now we're finding out that it's Tyler Bidet.
No, it's not.
It is. I swear to you it's Bidet. He didn't want anyone in Baltimore to make fun of him. It is. It's Bidet. It's bidet.
What the fuck?
I think we can move on to wide receivers now.
Yes.
Wow.
A buy low on Puka Nacua?
Puka Nacua.
It depends on the context of the trade-off.
Jax, we were on a roll there. Everything was so hilarious that we were doing, and then you did.
You had me all
bad
with the fart
joke.
sounds.
Very punny, but I
hey,
get
are we still on for $100 for Puka Nacua versus Michael Wilson rest of career? Me and you?
Yeah, we're still on for $1 million for that.
Okay, I'm just checking.
Yeah, it's $1 million.
Okay.
So Puka Nacua, I'll take the Puka Nacua. Like, there's got to be context to this. If somebody's looking to get out completely from Puka Nacua, then I'm willing to buy low on Puka Nacua, but I'm not buying high on Puka Nacua. I think that's the way you handle Puka Nacua.
Well, that's what I wanted to know.
He's
not high right now, but you're not actively you haven't gone out trying to send offers where you're getting Nacua. That's not something you're doing.
I had not as much Puka Nacua as Jax. I used one Puka Nacua share this offseason to get a Marvin Harrison Jr., and I used a Puka Nacua share this year while injured to get a Nico Collins. So I ran pure, I get alphas, but at the end of the day, Nacua is a high-level target earner, and Cooper Kupp taking on another injury year after year after year bodes well for Puka Nacua being a high target earner at some point again in his Rams career. Might not be this year, though.
What if I just
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What if I just traded Xavier Worthy? How would you feel about that?
I will take Puka Nacua for Xavier Worthy. And I have
No, I'm not talking about. No, sorry, I'm moving on because it's sort of rapid fire.
No, because Puka. No, you got to talk about Puka.
I'm trying to move to the next potential.
We got to
Jax, talk about.
Listen, Jax's guy, Puka ATM machine last year. Let's give Jax 60 seconds on Puka Nacua.
You've seen the money that Puka made me. So, but the answer here is if you're a rebuilder, now's the time to trade for Puka. You're going to a guy who's contending. I mean, if I'm a contender and I lost Puka and you come to me with 80 cents on the dollar on Puka, but I get production now, I would consider it. So that's really what you want to do. I mean, can you sell Marvin Harrison Jr. and get Puka back and then maybe get a first or something on top? You probably could.
There's a deal I would do.
Yeah.
That's a great deal. This is what you guys just talk in abstract. No, we give real actual deals. What do you think I did?
When you give me the chance
I gave you a real actual deal. You Bucky Irving and DK Metcalf.
That's a good one.
Right? That was the deal. Okay. So what about Tank Dell?
Buy low.
I bought Tank Dell 2 weeks ago on a team with exceptional running back depth. I got Tank Dell and a third for David Montgomery. And that team doesn't need David Montgomery because, again, I have Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, and Jahmyr Gibbs. I have the Holy Trinity on that team. So, and Matt, I have Rachaad White on my bench. So, I made that trade because I believe in Tank Dell. I believe in Tank Dell longevity. We saw him average 15.5 points per game as a rookie. Guys who do that can play ball. And I believe that the target share percentage is going to go up. He's not a sub 20% target share guy. If we look back in week 8, people who bought Tank Dell are going to be happy they did so.
Dell or Worthy?
Worthy. But it's close. They're both
Dell. JSN.
Close.
JSN. Did anyone sell in the chat, in the comments? By the way, if you're listening to this show still, if you haven't been totally alienated by the rude sound effects.
Bidet by Tyler
Right?
Bidet.
Yeah, just, us not respecting your time, right? Because we don't, obviously. If you've tuned out because of that, understood. If you're still with us, please like the show. I'm supposed to say that. And subscribe to the channel for wherever you're listening. Subscribe, please, and like the show. Also, put a comment in, especially if you've traded any of the players we've talked about. That's a rhetorical trick because we've talked about pretty much every fucking player in the league. That's why I'm the Podfather. I can recognize rhetorical tricks when they're done to me, but you can't recognize them when I do them to you. That's how you know I'm the Podfather. Right here. U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. That's actually it's written in there. Rhetorical tricks and what he does, and it's all there. Did anyone, and again, let us know in the comments for wherever you're listening, trade Jackson Smith and Jigba after week 2? Did anyone do that? Should they have?
I think that we want Seattle Seahawks on our teams right now. And I think that Ryan Grubb's offense hasn't even been fully unleashed. And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba showed you what he could do in week 2. Week 3 was a 2-touchdown performance for Zach Charbonnet and another big DK Metcalf game. This week could very well be a JSN week. What the important thing, though, Matt, is JSN has flipped Tyler Lockett. That's the important takeaway, where JSN is the higher target earner. That's all we needed to see. This is a very talented football player. Is he going to ever be Cooper Kupp in like we thought maybe coming out? Like, no. But I think he could give us a season where we're going to see a few more weeks like we saw in week 2, like 20 PPR point weeks. So I think that it's been a positive for Jackson Smith and Jigba this season because we've actually seen him have a spike week game where he was heavily targeted. And Matt, the important thing about that game to me was DK Metcalf also had the 3rd most targets of his entire career, and they combined for 30 targets. So we're seeing an offense that can support multiple pass catchers and an offense that's going to score points. And that same game, Geno Smith had the most completions and the most attempts and the most completions of his entire career in that game. So Ryan Grubb. In a couple weeks, people are going to be talking about Ryan Grubb.
Right. Ryan Grubb, the fantasy points hub.
Ryan Grubb, the ADP whisperer.
Well, that doesn't rhyme.
Doesn't
so
rhyme.
We were talking about Seattle this offseason, and that really the only thing they needed to run super pure is for the 49ers defense to experience some injuries. And now what are we seeing? The 49ers defense starting to give up a lot of points. And then they're facing the Cardinals. And then they're facing the Rams twice a year. And the schedule, who are they playing this week? Oh, the Lions at Detroit. This is the beauty. Even if you have Geno Smith, if the schedule just lines up, locks in just right, like it did for Ceedee Lamb in the second half last year, then it could be a fantasy points boon. So now is not the time to trade Jackson Smith and Jigba. Just enjoy it. Enjoy it. You were right. You were right to hold on. Enjoy it.
May I remind everyone of my bet with Billy Muzio? I have JSN having to finish higher than wide receiver 32. Nice big bet. Our other bet, Devon Achane versus Joe Mixon, final fantasy points. No injury caveat. So I'm going to be cashing some checks on our guy, Billy Muzio.
Okay, we're clipping that and sending it to Billy. I think I've talked to him recently. He disagrees. Khalil Shakir, we had him ranked shockingly high in the season rankings based on our projections. Evan Ringler, just a genius, one of these like young gun geniuses. How do you have Shakir so high? And then we saw what happened last week, and then there's just no stopping this guy, right? Jax loves Shakir.
Well, a vote for Shakir is a vote against Keon Coleman to some degree. It's a vote against, all these guys. I think the mistake that was made in Buffalo was just assigning all these targets to Dalton Kincaid, which I was telling Theo to tread lightly a little bit. Every time I heard Dalton Kincaid to the moon, I really thought that seems a little bit of the pouring all of the targets from Gabe Davis and Steph Diggs into one cup. And it didn't make that much sense to me. And it turns out that Khalil Shakir was one of the guys that was one of the bigger, beneficiaries of the vacated targets, and not anybody else, including Curtis Samuel, who a lot of people put their chip on Curtis Samuel. Looks like it's Khalil Shakir.
It's all about Khalil Shakir. Sorry about Keon Coleman, Theo.
Well, Khalil Shakir is playing well, and I'll say he steamed up at the end in redraft where people were drafting him pretty aggressively, and it's being paid off. I do think that there is going to be weeks where we're going to see where Josh Allen is sort of spreading the wealth. There's not a true alpha. Khalil Shakir is not a guy who's going to be like a massive, massive target earner, but he is getting high-value targets. He's scoring touchdowns. He's a win right now in Dynasty for what you had to pay for him last year. He's a win in Dynasty for what you had to pay for him in a Dynasty startup. And, yeah, he's one of the preferred targets on a team that's scoring a shitload of points, too. So, Shakir, absolutely, you're happy to have him.
You're welcome.
I think he's a sell high, though.
Oh, yeah. And I tried selling him last week in a trade to get a running back in a league, and I might go back to that same manager. Well, that team has so loaded at wide receiver. That's the thing. Some of my rosters are just so beautiful that I don't need a guy like a Khalil Shakir.
Just put a calendar reminder when your trade deadline is. He's going to keep producing. Make sure you deal him before they go out and draft a receiver in the first round, right? Or they acquire another receiver. I mean, if Keon Coleman busts in an epic fashion, they're going to just turn right around and go receiver again. NFL teams do this all the time. They go right back to the well. If the first doesn't succeed, then they'll go right back to that wide receiver in the first or second round again. You've seen NFL teams do like 3 consecutive years. Just keep going right back to it. I think famously, the Lions drafted a wide receiver in the top 5 3 consecutive years. And the first 2 busted, and the third was Calvin Johnson.
The Kansas City Chiefs most recently was Sky Moore busts, huge hit on Rashee Rice, and probably a hit with Xavier Worthy. I mean, but Sky Moore bust, but they go back to the well with 3 straight years of day 2 or higher draft picks. So you're right, Matt. There's going to be better wide receivers and I'll say the Bills.
Deadline deal on Shakir. Yeah, enjoy the production, then trade him at the deadline.
I'll say that the real NFL trade deadline, keep an eye on Buffalo because there's going to be some veteran wide receivers available. That wide receiver room might look different when we get to the NFL playoffs than it does right now.
Oh man, that's why they have me in this chair.
Amari Cooper.
That's why they have me in this chair. Better trade him before they get Amari Cooper.
Cooper.
Another reason they have me in this chair is because I like to just take a step back and explain why dispassionately you just can't draft certain players at certain ADPs. And then also question fantasy analysts that for some reason don't process new information properly. And the best example was in seasonal leagues, but also in Dynasty, this disparity that we saw by the end of August still between Michael Pittman up here and Terry McLaurin down here. And then what did we see? Oh, there goes Scary Terry for 100 yards and a touchdown. And you're going to see more of that because there's nobody else in Washington. How obvious was Terry McLaurin in all formats? And how obvious was Michael Pittman as a stay away in a crowded wide receiver room on a team that revolves around Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson as a runner? How the hell can you justify paying up for Michael Pittman? So who do you think scores more fantasy points the rest of the year? Pittman or McLaurin?
McLaurin easily.
Jax?
Easily.
I agree. Yeah, I think I agree. Look, Terry McLaurin and Amari Cooper were two of the greatest week 2 buy lows if you were able to do it, because both were getting, a lot of looks, and nobody wants them. Once you see Terry McLaurin, not performing and Amari Cooper not performing, you start thinking, oh my God, this is the end. I'm never going to get anything for him. And both guys turned it around in week 3. If you look at, Amari Cooper's targets, he's got like over 30 targets in 3 weeks or something like that. He's pretty close. You know what I mean? If they go to Jameis or something like that, or if somehow, Deshaun Watson can just fucking throw it to him, you know what I mean? It's like, Amari's got a huge target share. And then Terry McLaurin, there is a little bit of concern with the rushing quarterback and the low pass volume there. But Terry McLaurin is the downfield player. He missed him on a play. He should have had another one last night. Mm-hmm. Big touchdown. So he missed him on a big one. So, yep. Terry McLaurin, FT dubs.
And he's got less target competition than Michael Pittman. Yeah. I would argue that Michael Pittman actually has target competition this year, because we've seen that Anthony Richardson wants to take these shots downfield to Alec Pierce. There's going to be games where he's going to be taking more of them downfield to Adonai Mitchell. You've got Jonathan Taylor, who's a bell cow usage type guy out of the backfield. And then you've got Josh Downs being put back in the mix. And Josh Downs is not going to go the season without getting targets. Josh Downs is a good player, an underrated NFL football player.
I was going to go out on this. We're really going out on a Josh Downs take?
Yes.
Hey, oh my God. We didn't run an ad. Can you believe it?
I put it in the I put it in the chat. We
never ran an ad.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh my God. This whole show, I didn't run an ad on top 10 takeaways anymore. Something's wrong with me. We're going to undroppables.
I want to give.
You know what we're gonna do? We're not. We could have gone out on it. That would have been a great thing to go out on. We didn't. We'll probably go out on it in the podcast at least. And visit undroppables.com. Undroppables.com. Check it out. They have a lot of great information.
Thanks,
if you liked what Jax had to say today, which I'm sure you did, just make sure you're checking out undroppables.com. Theo, anything else to leave the audience with?
No, make sure you check out our rankings. We're getting continual updates here at Player Profiler. Not too late for you to subscribe for the season and get your team back on track. A lot of 1 and 2 teams out there that could use like some Billy Muzio weekly rankings in their life right now. And our Dynasty rankings, we're updating them constantly. So we got you here at Player Profiler.
Well, the big Dynasty rankings update is coming.
Billy Muzio is good.
Love
Don't
Billy
use
Muzio.
The code Billy, though. Use the code Theo.
Big Dynasty rankings update about to drop, and the question is the reason you subscribe, and the reason if you're already subscribed why you got to check it. Go check it. We're all gonna find out together where Trevor Lawrence settles in. The Golden Boy. You check the rankings, see how far the Golden Boy falls. From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.